The phosphorescent waters of Iron Bottom Sound churned white behind 8 racing patrol boats. Their wooden hulls cut through the darkness like knives. Each wake blazed with tropical light. The night air hung thick around the Solomon Islands. Lieutenant Rollin West. Holmes felt the mahogany deck vibrating beneath his boots. 3 Packard engines roared behind him. 18 months of Pacific warfare had sharpened his instincts. Tonight, those instincts screamed warnings he couldn't ignore. His hands gripped the wheel of PT-109. The boat trembled with raw power. 30 knots, and climbing. Around him spread the most audacious naval formation ever attempted. 8 wooden vessels preparing to challenge the entire Japanese Navy. To his starboard side, PT-37 held perfect position. Lieutenant Lester Gamble commanded that boat. His face showed the same grim determination that marked every man in the flotilla. To port side stretched more boats. Each carried crews barely old enough to vote. Boys of 19 and 20 crouched at battle stations. They tried to project confidence they didn't feel. Their young faces betrayed the terror building inside. Ensign Bryant Larson leaned close to Holmes's ear. Engine noise made normal conversation impossible. Radio reports 11 Japanese destroyers approaching, sir. Another Tokyo Express supply run. Holmes's mind processed the impossible mathematics. 11 warships approaching fast, each stretched over 300 feet of armored steel. 5-inch guns bristled from every superstructure. Anti-aircraft batteries crowned every deck. Combined tonnage exceeded 22,000 tons of Imperial Fury, racing south to resupply Guadalcanal garrison troops. Against this steel armada came 8 wooden boats, 80 feet of plywood construction, mahogany planking over lightweight frames, total weight barely 50 tons each. The comparison seemed almost laughable. Hornets preparing to attack eagles. David facing not 1, but 11 Goliaths. Yet Holmes knew something the Japanese didn't understand, something that would reshape Pacific naval warfare forever. These weren't ordinary patrol craft. They were floating lightning bolts, capable of 40 knots maximum speed, 10 knots faster than any destroyer afloat. More crucially, they carried 4 Mark 8 torpedoes each, weapons designed to crack battleship hulls wide open. Radio operator Carl Barthold watched their gunner packing personal belongings. The methodical way the man folded each item spooked everyone watching, like someone taking a final inventory of earthly possessions. "That guy has me rattled," Barthold would remember years later. Holmes couldn't shake one terrifying question. Were they witnessing revolutionary warfare being born? Or were they racing toward collective suicide? PT-109's engines reached full military power. The wooden hull rose slightly from the water, riding on spray and momentum through increasingly rough seas. Holmes had no way to predict what the next 4 hours would bring. His tiny flotilla was about to achieve something unprecedented in naval history. They would prove that speed and stealth could triumph over size and armor. The Japanese had no idea what approached them through the darkness. Captain Raizo Tanaka stood on his flagship destroyer's bridge. At 52 years old, he was the undisputed master of nocturnal naval combat. 4 months of Tokyo Express runs to Guadalcanal. 27 successful supply missions completed. 0 losses to enemy surface action. His confidence wasn't misplaced arrogance. These destroyers represented the finest night-fighting vessels ever built. Long lance torpedoes provided devastating striking power. Superior optical equipment gave Japanese crews massive advantages in darkness. Extensive training had perfected their nocturnal combat techniques. The Japanese advantages seemed overwhelming. Destroyer length exceeded 300 feet each. Displacement topped 2,000 tons per vessel. Main armament consisted of multiple 5-inch guns. Maximum speed reached 35 knots. Crews numbered over 200 trained sailors each. Night vision equipment surpassed anything Americans possessed. Tanaka's 11 destroyers raced south at 30 knots. Supply caches and reinforcement troops filled their holds. American naval intelligence tracked every movement through radio intercepts. At Henderson Field on Guadalcanal, Lieutenant Commander Alan Montgomery studied reconnaissance reports with growing excitement. The operations tent sweltered in tropical humidity. Montgomery addressed PT boat commanders gathered around makeshift tables. "Tonight we attempt something never tried in naval warfare, gentlemen." The plan violated every traditional combat doctrine. Instead of engaging destroyers in conventional surface battles, where Americans repeatedly lost, PT boats would use speed advantages to penetrate enemy formations, launch torpedoes at point-blank range, disappear into darkness before Japanese gunners could respond effectively. The boat disposition seemed optimal under circumstances, Holmes would report later. Privately, he harbored serious doubts about survival chances. The PT boats themselves represented American innovation at its finest. Electric Boat Company designed the basic concept. Elko Naval Division handled actual construction. They embodied completely revolutionary approaches to naval warfare. Plywood construction used 17 layers of mahogany planking. This created incredibly light, yet surprisingly strong hulls. More importantly, wood didn't register clearly on primitive radar systems. Ensign Bryant Larson observed PT-109's crew making final preparations. Night actions meant limited visibility, with patrol sections scattered over wide areas. Each man handled pre-combat nerves differently. Some cleaned weapons obsessively until every surface gleamed. Others stared silently at photographs from home. The Americans possessed one crucial advantage Japanese couldn't anticipate: raw speed from 3 Packard Vi-12 engines, the same power plants used in championship racing cars. These engines could push lightweight hulls beyond 40 knots maximum. This wasn't just faster than Japanese destroyers. This exceeded anything the Imperial Navy had ever encountered in surface combat situations. The 8 PT boats formed up as darkness deepened around them. Crews removed defensive ammunition to make room for extra torpedoes. This wasn't simple confidence in their abilities. This was calculated betting that speed would keep them alive long enough. They planned to close distance until hits became guaranteed, then outrun any possible pursuit attempts. Radar operators on Guadalcanal reported Japanese formations 60 miles north and closing fast. Tanaka's destroyers maintained their standard battle line formation. This arrangement had proven unbeatable against conventional American naval forces repeatedly. Tonight, convention was about to meet revolution head-on. PT-109 throttled up to attack speed with engines howling. Holmes felt the boat lifting slightly from the water surface, riding on cushions of spray and phosphorescent foam. Behind him, 7 other wooden thunderbolts matched his acceleration perfectly. Their combined wakes created patterns of light that would have been beautiful under peaceful circumstances. Japanese destroyers appeared on the horizon as dark silhouettes against star-filled skies. Massive forms moving with confidence of predators who had never encountered threats they couldn't handle easily. That assumption was about to change forever. The sea exploded into complete chaos at 22:45 hours. PT-109 screamed toward the Japanese formation at 42 knots maximum speed. Her Packard engines howled like tormented spirits as Holmes pushed every ounce of available power through the lightweight hull structure. Phosphorescent wake blazed behind them like liquid fire trails. Streams of light that would have made perfect targets if Japanese crews had been scanning water-level approaches. They weren't looking in the right places. Captain Tanaka's destroyer crews had trained for years to fight aerial threats exclusively. Searchlights swept desperately across empty skies, while real danger approached from wave level below them. Anti-aircraft guns, massive 25mm and 40mm weapons designed to shred incoming bomber formations, literally could not depress low enough to target racing PT boats effectively. "Range 800 yards, Larson shouted over overwhelming engine noise, his voice barely audible as PT-1009 closed distance to the lead destroyer at impossible rates. The Japanese warship loomed larger every passing second. 320 feet of steel armor bristling with guns that couldn't aim low enough to save her from destruction. At 600 yards, the Japanese finally understood what they were facing. Searchlights swung down from sky to sea level. Brilliant white cones caught PT-109 in blinding illumination. For one terrifying moment, Holmes felt like an insect pinned to a specimen board, completely exposed with nowhere to hide from enemy fire. Throttle up to make final sprint to distances less than 1,000 yards. This became standard PT boat doctrine, born in moments of absolute terror and absolute opportunity combined. Machine gun fire erupted from the destroyer's superstructure sections. Not the massive main batteries, but small-caliber weapons only. These were the only guns capable of engaging such low-fast targets effectively. Tracer rounds carved brilliant lines through tropical air around them. But PT-109's radical speed and evasive maneuvering made her nearly impossible to hit accurately. At 400 yards, point-blank range for naval combat situations, Holmes made his critical decision. Fire torpedoes immediately. All four fish dropped into iron bottom sound with barely audible splashes. Electric motors whirred to life as they raced toward the Japanese destroyer at 46 knots each. Each torpedo carried 643 pounds of high-explosive warhead, enough destructive power to break the back of any warship currently afloat. Captain Tanaka watched in stunned disbelief as the tiny wooden boat released 4 white torpedo wakes directly at his flagship vessel. 27 years of naval service had never shown him anything comparable. Such small vessels attacking such large ones at such close ranges violated every principle of naval warfare he had ever learned or taught. PT-109 didn't wait to observe torpedo results. The instant her weapons were away, Holmes threw the wheel hard to port side. All 3 engines opened to maximum power settings. The wooden boat literally flew across wave tops, with spray cascading over her low hull, as she executed high-speed escape maneuvers no destroyer could possibly match. Behind them, Lieutenant Lester Gamble in PT-37 was executing his own attack run on a second destroyer target. His approach was even more audacious than Holmes had attempted, coming in from port quarter at angles that would result in certain destruction or certain success with no middle ground possible. Japanese destroyer Teruzuki, flagship of the rear section, found herself under simultaneous attack from 2 different directions. PT-37's first torpedo struck near the aft section with tremendous explosion that lit up the night sky like artificial daylight conditions. The concussion threw Captain Tanaka to the deck of his bridge unconscious from blast effects. What happened next defied all expectations of conventional naval combat. PT-48, following up Gamble's attack, suffered complete engine failure just as she came under concentrated fire from 3 Japanese destroyers simultaneously. Dead in the water, she should have been annihilated instantly by overwhelming firepower. Instead, her crew fought back with everything available to them. Her gunner, trapped in a burning gun tub with ammunition cooking off all around him, stayed at his post to extinguish flaming cartridges before they could explode catastrophically. Another crew member leaned out of the engine room to fire his personal rifle at the destroyer's bridge structure, a .30-06 bullet against 300 feet of armored warship. PT-59, commanded by Ensign John McElfresh, found herself passing within 100 yards of destroyer Kuroshio, an extremely dangerous situation for any wooden boat under these circumstances. Japanese crew members could literally see individual American sailors as their searchlights illuminated the tiny vessel completely. Instead of being intimidated by overwhelming odds, McElfresh ordered his crew to open fire with every weapon they possessed. Machine guns chattered continuously. The 37mm cannon boomed repeatedly. Even personal weapons joined the desperate fight. The sight of such a small vessel attacking such a large one so aggressively stunned the Japanese destroyer crew into momentary inaction and confusion. That moment of hesitation was enough time needed. PT-59 escaped into protective darkness, leaving behind a destroyer whose crew would spend the rest of the night trying to understand what they had just witnessed. The explosion that destroyed destroyer Teruzuki was unlike anything the Japanese Navy had previously experienced in Pacific combat. PT-37's torpedo, striking near aft magazines, triggered massive secondary explosions that could be seen from miles away in all directions. The blast was so powerful it lifted the destroyer's stern completely out of the water before breaking her back like a snapped stick. Massive explosion damaged powder magazines completely. Kingston valves opened automatically. These were the terse Japanese damage control reports. Of Teruzuki's 356-man crew, only 196 could be rescued from the water. The remaining 160 were forced to swim to shore or drown in the dark waters of Iron Bottom Sound. For the first time in the Pacific War, a capital ship of the Imperial Japanese Navy had been sunk by American PT boats in surface action. The psychological impact was immediate and absolutely devastating to Japanese morale. Destroyer crews who had dominated night warfare for months suddenly found themselves vulnerable to enemies they couldn't effectively fight back against using conventional tactics. Dawn broke over the Solomon Islands, revealing the complete results of the night's action clearly. The vaunted Tokyo Express had been stopped cold for the first time. No supplies reached the Japanese garrison on Guadalcanal that night. Captain Tanaka's perfect record was shattered forever beyond repair. Most shocking of all, not a single American PT boat had been lost in the engagement. 8 wooden vessels had engaged 11 steel destroyers and emerged completely victorious. They had revolutionized naval warfare in a single night of combat. The age of the battleship was ending rapidly. The age of speed and stealth had begun definitively. Admiral William Bull Halsey's reaction was immediate and completely unequivocal in its enthusiasm. They are performing absolutely heroic services under impossible circumstances. Silver stars were awarded to crew members who had stayed at their posts under the most impossible circumstances imaginable. But the real recognition came from a completely unexpected source. The enemy themselves provided the ultimate tribute. Captain Raizo Tanaka, the undisputed master of Tokyo Express warfare, found his at-sea career effectively ended by that single night's devastating action. The man who had run supplies to Guadalcanal 27 times without significant losses was reassigned to shore duty immediately. Never again would he command destroyers in combat situations. The psychological transformation was complete and absolutely irreversible in its effects. Japanese destroyer crews, who had approached every night action with confidence, born of months of continuous victories, now scanned the waters nervously. They searched constantly for telltale phosphorescent wakes of approaching PT boats. The hunters had become the hunted completely. Before December 7, 1942, the Tokyo Express had achieved 27 successful runs without major losses. Japanese night victories had been 100% successful. PT boat effectiveness remained completely untested in combat. After December 7, 1942, the Tokyo Express was disrupted for the first time ever. Capital ships had been sunk by PT boats for the first time. New naval doctrine emphasized speed over armor for the first time. The success led to immediate tactical changes throughout the entire Pacific theater of operations. PT boat squadrons received priority for new equipment deliveries. Experienced crews were assigned to the most dangerous missions available. What had begun as an experimental program became the spearhead of American naval operations in restricted waters everywhere. Lieutenant Rollin West Holmes, whose methodical nature had questioned their survival chances, found himself transformed into a pioneer of modern naval warfare tactics. His detailed after-action reports became required reading at the Naval War College for years afterward. They taught future generations of officers that innovation and audacity could triumph over tradition and raw firepower when properly applied. Night actions meant limited visibility, with patrol sections scattered over wide areas, Ensign Bryant Larson observed in his official report. But this limitation had become their greatest strength in combat. Invisibility was the new armor protection. Speed was the new artillery effectiveness. The ripple effects extended far beyond the Solomon Islands' campaign boundaries. Japanese naval doctrine, built around large ship engagements and night surface actions, had to be completely reconsidered from the ground up. Resources were diverted to develop countermeasures against small, fast attack craft. Resources that couldn't be used for offensive operations elsewhere. Perhaps most importantly, the success demonstrated that American industrial innovation could overcome Japanese tactical superiority through superior technology and training. The PT boats represented everything American manufacturing did best under wartime conditions. Mass production of lightweight, fast, technically sophisticated weapon systems, operated by young aggressive crews with nothing to lose. Captain Kohei Hanami, who would later command destroyer Amagiri in the famous collision with PT-9 that nearly killed future President John F. Kennedy, would spend the rest of his life reflecting on this moment when naval warfare changed forever. Post-war, as mayor of his hometown, he would write directly to JFK years later. "I take this opportunity to pay my profound respect to your daring and courageous action in combat." The wooden thunder of PT boat engines had announced more than just new tactical approaches. It had proclaimed the arrival of completely new kinds of warfare where speed, innovation, and courage could overcome size, tradition, and superior numbers effectively. Today, as we observe modern conflicts unfolding with drone warfare, cyber attacks, and asymmetric tactical approaches, the lesson of December 7, 1942, remains as relevant as ever before. Innovation doesn't just change how wars are fought tactically, it changes who can fight them successfully and who can win them ultimately. Lieutenant West Holmes's terrifying question about witnessing the birth of new warfare, or their own destruction, had been answered definitively that night. They had witnessed both simultaneously: the destruction of traditional naval combat doctrine and the birth of modern asymmetric warfare tactics. The sound of those Packard engines racing across Iron Bottom Sound echoed into the future continuously, a wooden thunder that announced the dawn of a completely new age in human conflict resolution. The legacy lives on today every time small, agile forces defeat larger conventional enemies through speed, and innovation. From modern naval special operations to asymmetric warfare tactics worldwide, the fundamental lesson remains unchanged. In the right hands, with the right strategy properly executed, David can still defeat Goliath decisively.